If you're looking to buy a new house, it's a good idea to have your electrical system inspected so you know what you're getting yourself into. In general, it's fairly unlikely you'll find anything that should scare you off or make purchasing the home a deal breaker. The point of the inspection is to give you a general awareness of what kind of condition the system is in, and if you want to add anything in the future, what you may or may not have to do. So the first place I would start is outside at the electrical system where everything comes in. The reason I like to start on the outside of the house is because this is where the power first comes in. So if we tend to see an issue out here, we know that issue might impact what we see on the inside as well. And we take a look here to see what kind of condition the meter's in, the meter socket's in, what type of wiring is coming into the building, if is it in conduit, is it bare conductor, what kind of shape is it in, is anything corroded. Then we'll look at the point of attachment up top. Is it secure? Are the connectors corroded? Is there a potential failure up there? And kind of inspect this overall system to make sure everything's in good condition. So the overall condition of this outside electrical service is pretty good. The conduit's in good shape, the meter socket's in good shape, there's no obvious corrosion, no holes in the bottom of the meter socket itself. But there is one problem area we did find, and that's up top. The point of attachment that's there to hold the service coming over from the pole to the house isn't attached. The only thing holding that wire up is the wire itself and the metal that's been wrapped around this soffit. We need to make sure we reattach that anchor and open up where the weatherhead is above the service as well. Next, I'll take a look at the electrical panels. This will give us an idea of how much power we have coming in, what's available for future use, and what's currently being used. So here we actually have 2 panels, and that's because this is a condo. We have 2 units, 1 panel per unit. In this case, we're going to focus on panel number 2 for the unit we're working on. We're going to look at the general condition and see what kind of shape it is, see if there's any obvious signs of moisture getting in here or some kind of problem. So at a quick glance, there's no rust, the bottom's nice and solid. There are no open knockouts that I'd worry about something falling in. Everything's pretty well sealed up. It looks like a lot of the proper connectors on the wires coming in, and everything feels pretty solid. So now that we start to take a look at the inside, we'll start up top at our main breaker for this. We know we have 100 amps for this unit. And then we'll take a look at the breakers inside and see what we have. We want to see if anything feels loose, feels a little funny, see if any of them are warm to the touch. That's never a good sign either. That means something may be loose or might be drawing a little too much power and the breaker isn't doing its job anymore. The other thing we want to look for is we want to make sure that the breakers are the proper breaker to be in the panel. You can't just interchange whichever breaker you want with whichever panel it happens to fit in. So here at the label, it'll tell you the manufacturer of the panel and what breakers are acceptable to install in this panel. If you have an older home, you may find that you actually have a fuse panel in place, and that's an indicator of an older system. That may be something you want to look at having upgraded at some point. One of the last things we want to check now is we want to make sure that we have our grounding electrode conductor in place, and that's the ground wire that comes from our service to either ground rods, your water service, or some kind of other electrode. We want to make sure that's intact and the right size. And while we're in the basement, this gives us a chance to take a look at what types of wiring we have in the building. Typically we're going to see an M cable, that's perfectly fine. You might find an older cloth-covered cable, and that could be fine too, as long as it's in good condition, the insulation hasn't broken down, and you don't see any signs of damage. And then we go back to knob and tube. If you find knob and tube, you really want to look at having that replaced, since a lot of places can't be insured if they have active knob and tube in there. That's something you want to have removed and rewired appropriately. And finally, I'll head upstairs and I'll take a look at the fixtures and the receptacles. For the fixtures, we want to take a quick look and see if there's any physical damage, any parts hanging, obvious corrosion. And the biggest thing to take a look at is, are the lamps the correct size? We want to make sure that they're not oversized so we don't have an overheating issue. Next, we'll take a look at the receptacles. And for the receptacles, one of the big areas we want to focus on are the areas where there might be moisture, such as kitchens, bathrooms, basements, exterior of the home. I want to make sure that we have GFCI protection, whether it's done by a receptacle or a breaker itself. So GFCI is ground fault circuit interrupter, and what this does is it senses a certain amount of current coming into the device being used and a certain amount coming back out. If this sees a slight imbalance, something as small as 5 milliamps, it'll turn the power off to help prevent you from getting shocked. It's always a good idea to use a tester to test the wiring configuration to make sure that it's wired correctly and to see if you really do have a ground wire in that 3-prong receptacle. And every once in a while you find something unusual, and in this case we did. Underneath this blue tape that someone thought was a good idea is actually an old floor receptacle that's, I'm not sure how old, that looks like it's still possibly active. No metal plate, not really held in, just waiting for something to fall through and hit it. We want to make sure that we de-energize this, take this out, put a nice solid cover plate over it, and make sure nothing falls in here that could cause a problem. And if I can give you any advice when you're looking at the electrical system in a new home you may be purchasing or in a home you may already own, it's don't panic. Just because things aren't up to today's current codes doesn't mean that it wasn't built to the codes at the time that the house was done. It's a good idea to update things as you start to renovate. If you make changes, things down the road, then yes, we want to bring it up to code and bring it up to date. But just because it's not up to today's code doesn't mean that it isn't safe.
Thanks for watching. This Old House has got a video for just about every home improvement project, so be sure to check out the others. And if you like what you see, click on the subscribe button to make sure that you get our newest videos right in your feed.